Welcome, everybody, to episode 1 of What's Left LA. This is a collaboration podcast between myself, Cinemarxism, I go by he, him pronouns, and Tofu Ghost. We are both Twitch streamers.
Cheers.
We are you can watch our podcast live at twitch.tv/Cinemarxism and also twitch.tv/Tofu Ghost, TOFUGH0ST.
That's right, with the zero and the ghost, because I'm annoying.
Yeah. So I am a filmmaker activist. I've been living in LA for about 4 years, and have become really active and interested in the politics scene inside LA. So I'm really happy to be able to share this space with Tofu to kind of bring attention to some local issues that we are facing in our city, in hopes that you could take some lessons from it and apply it to wherever you live, or if you live in LA, you can help get involved with alongside of us.
Right.
Tofu, do you want to give an introduction for yourself?
I'm Tofu Ghost. I am a musician turned streamer. I go by she, they pronouns mostly. Um, I am a politics streamer here on Twitch. I found myself doing politics content here on Twitch, and I have been dying to get more involved and do more with my content and with my community and my audience in regards to inspiring local activism, whether that be through electoralism or otherwise. Um, and a pro gamer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah, we do some gaming occasionally. Gotta turn that off. I got a light on.
Oh, me too. Good call.
Go. So yeah, I think you started, you kind of said it before, but I definitely want to reiterate. One of the main reasons we're doing this is because, as much as I love to focus on national politics and participate in national political conversations, so often it can feel like with national politics that our influence is so small, and it's very easy to feel powerless and to feel like we are, we have no control over what goes on at that level. And I think at a local level, the more local that you get in your activism, the
Yes.
more exponentially your impact can be felt, and the more you can really actually sway these things. I truly believe that. And so that's why we kind of wanted to to give some attention to these local issues, and kind of call out some awesome stuff happening in our city. So
Absolutely. Sift through the doomerism and find what's left, if you will.
no, 100%. Okay, so this week we're going to start off going over some local news, just some different things that are happening in LA this week. Yesterday, actually Sunday, February 25th, was a huge day in LA activism, and I can't wait to share with you why. We can start with, I think we'll start with the Spirit Awards, which were a very interesting. The Spirit Awards are an award show for movies, typically independent film. They're run by Film Independent, which is like an NGO that helps with independent films, and helps to fund them. And they hold these Spirit Awards in Santa Monica every year. And this year, during the Spirit Awards, they say a handful of protesters here, but really the most effective part of it was that there was really one person who had a megaphone and was outside of the award show, which was held inside of a tent on Santa Monica, around Santa Monica, and was playing previously recorded chants such as "Free Palestine," "Long Live Palestine," and "Ceasefire Now." And in doing this, he actually forced so many of the red carpet guests, award recipients, and presenters to address the genocide happening in Palestine and Gaza right now. So I just wanted to bring attention to that incredible, action by these protesters, and show just what a small handful of people have basically forced a ton of creatives that a lot of people look up to finally take a stance. The stances were varied. Okay. A lot of people were kind of dismissive. Some people called them hecklers, like Jimmy O Yang called the person outside a heckler. But other people were more sympathetic, including a really good quote here from Boots Riley, socialist, hip hop artist, and filmmaker responsible for I'm a Virgo, which is an incredible series if you haven't seen it. In response to the protest, he said, "In the place where everybody's got the loudest voice, you're not going to hear many people talk about that, right? As artists, we need to be part of helping movements that are trying to stop it. Being scared to say something about it is the opposite of what will help." So that was a really cool action that happened yesterday.
Rad. I think we have a couple more things that we'd like to highlight as well.
Yeah.
On that, in activism in LA. Let me see. Should I share my screen for the couple things that we had on
Oh yeah, we can
this?
do
Let's see.
share screen. I was just kind of pulling it over to my main
Oh,
thing
to
when I was
your
reading too, but
got it. Okay.
whatever you feel comfortable with.
Here, let me do this. We had a visitor recently to the city of Los Angeles. We had Nancy Pelosi, none other than the mama bear herself, Nancy Pelosi, show up to Los Angeles. And as Angelinos do in uh, classic Angelino fashion, we wanted to give any visitor a nice warm welcome and let them know how cared about and welcome they truly are. Let me pull something up here. Sorry, one moment.
So this was an action yesterday at a fundraiser for Nancy Pelosi. She tried to hold a fundraiser in LA, as a lot of politicians often do, and LA responded in force.
Peru. Here, let me do it like this. That way everybody can
Yeah,
see
that
it.
works.
All right, we'll see how Angelino's welcomed her in. Can y'all hear that?
I'm not getting
Oh,
audio.
there we go. Welcome to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
It's great to have you. Stay a while. We also had this here.
Yeah, it was a very, very clear message that you are not welcome here.
Jay.
Yeah, next up, are you still watching the video?
Yes. Sorry. Oh, is it not sharing? Oh goodness.
No, it's okay though.
So I'd like to point out people in the crowd with yarmulkes as well,
Yeah,
standing in solidarity with Palestine.
there's a very large and active anti-Zionist Jewish community in Los Angeles. I think if you spend any time in the streets in Los Angeles for Palestine, you'll see that very quickly. There are a lot of Jewish people who are resisting the Zionist occupation of Gaza.
Definitely. Looks like I'm dropping frames on my end, so I don't know if sharing content on my end
If screen sharing,
is
that's okay.
actually working. Yeah.
I can take over. Okay, next up we have the third action of the day. So this is all just happening yesterday in LA. The third thing was LA became the first city to hold a vigil and protest for Nex Benedict, who was the non-binary child, 16-year-old who died after being bullied at school. Was involved in a hate crime fight in their restroom, in which they were severely beaten and unfortunately passed the next day. Hundreds of Los Angelinos met at the Hollywood United Church of Christ to honor Nex's life, and then led a very moving march down Sunset Boulevard. So here are some images from that from friend of the show, VPS Reports, who was on the ground covering it. This is a protest and vigil that I honestly haven't seen getting much press outside of independent journalists who were on the ground there. So, but I think it's still very important to recognize that this is happening. People are in the streets, and Nex's life is being honored in ways by the trans community and the Los Angeles greater LGBT community.
That's right. People out there letting people know that there
We're
are.
trans! We're here! We're trans! We're here! We're trans! We're here! Our streets! Our streets! Our streets! Our streets!
Yeah. So those are three incredible stories coming out of LA of activism and people getting out in their communities and organizing and fighting back against the oppressive structures that we see. There is one last story that I wanted to talk about today before we bring in our guest and introduce our guest. I wanted to talk about a story from last year in which is getting a little bit of an update. Where do we start with this story? We start at the end of last year. The reports started to come out about a LAPD training officer who died suddenly. We didn't really know what happened. But now, as things have kind of the smoke has cleared on this incident, he died during a training. During an LAPD training, he suffered very severe injuries and died. And now the family and the family's lawyers are being very clear in the press and saying that he was killed intentionally, and they filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the LAPD. And they seem very, very convinced that this was done, that Officer Tipping was killed intentionally. And there's a lot of evidence that actually kind of supports that. For example, Officer Tipping actually was in the middle of quitting his job. He wanted to leave the force. And while doing that, he was also working on reporting a group sexual assault that he witnessed by other officers. And during the training in which he was killed, two of the people that were involved in that he would be reporting had signed up for his class intentionally. And he was supposedly role playing a uncooperative person that they were supposed to be arresting. And in doing the exercise, he was dropped on his head and required staples to his scalp and his skull, and also had a torn liver. And he never regained consciousness after this, and he passed away. So this is a story that I think is very easy to kind of fall through the cracks, and I want to cover it just because this is how LAPD treats their own. Whenever if there's ever an example, we say ACAB here with our full chest and proud to do so. But when cops quit, I think that's the only example of a good cop, and we see exactly how they are treated in this story. And it's a story that we're going to keep following as this wrongful death lawsuit continues. Of course, nobody has been arrested for this death. The LAPD, including former Chief Michael Moore, has defended the circumstances around his death and said that it was completely accidental. without any real follow up after that. So
Make no mistake, this is the thin blue line. That when people talk about the thin blue line, that's what that represents. This is the culture that you're looking at. This is just an example, just a scratching the surface of the greater culture that is shared, a greater police culture. And when you see so much self-investigation, you see so much like when in the case of LA and the LA Sheriff's Department, so much uh, what is the word? So much sabotaging, I guess, for lack of a better term, off the top of my head, because I'm blanking right now for some
yeah.
reason, of any efforts to gain oversight or to gain accountability over the police in Los Angeles. This is literal gang behavior.
No, yeah, actually. And you know, it would be easy to say like, "Oh, this isn't like indicative. It's just like a few bad apples or something like that." Until you realize that nobody has been investigated, nobody has been arrested for this. Like there have been no repercussions for for this for not only the murder itself, but for the things that Tipping was reporting on, you know, that he was reporting. There still haven't been any developments in that, and Michael Moore just continues to defend everybody involved in that. So yeah, it goes all the way up to the top. It's very indicative of like a horrible, horrible, you know, case of corruption, and when it gets violent and horrible. So yeah, those are a few local news stories that we wanted to cover. We'll be doing that like every week. I think we'll give like 15, 20 minutes of just like local chit chat covering different stories. But now we're gonna move on to our very first guest on What's Left LA. Well, I'm very excited to talk to. We'll be talking with Kris Rehl. Kris is a writer. He was a WGA captain, and I saw him many times on the writing the strike line on the picket lines. He's an
Nice.
organizer with LA Street Care. He was a 2020 DNC delegate, and he also writes really incredible LA voter guides. Some of the best LA voter guides that you can get. And so, you know, if you guys don't know, the voter guides it's called Move Left LA, a voter guide to better politics in Los Angeles. Kris spends immense amount of time researching and writing these voter guides that are, you know, very different from other voter guides you may see, which probably just get, you know, lost in your mailbox. And it just is like a 1-page sheet that just tells you exactly the candidate to vote for. Kris's document is extensively researched, extensively cited. He's not just going to tell you who to vote for, but he's going to tell you why. And oftentimes the explanations are a lot more interesting, and it's a great way to kind of get a basic understanding of LA politics in a really comprehensive way. So, without further ado, let me bring Kris into this call, and let's let him tell his own story. Let me see how I can add into. Oops, it kicked us out. Hello, Kris. Hey, Kris, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello, Tofu.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay?
I think Kris is figuring out his sound output real fast.
Okay. Already, I love the plants.
Did that totally break your setup?
What's that?
I said, did that break your setup?
Yeah, I had to redo some things. We scuffed out here. Left this podcast.
It's okay. We'll edit all this out.
I just got my audio to work.
Okay, can you hear us now?
Yeah.
Hello,
Okay,
hello.
perfect. Yeah, you sound great too. So welcome in, Kris. First off, let me introduce you to Tofu. I know we know each other, but Tofu, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Great to meet you. I'm Tofu. I'm a streamer and that we talk about politics and mostly national politics on Twitch. Very nice to meet you. I'm a huge fan of the voter guide, and I'm excited to talk to you about it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So Kris, I think I first learned about the voter guide when I was working with the Albert Corrado campaign, and your voter guide was one of the few voter guides that I felt really like looked at the CD13 race in like a very like holistic way, and like with a real strong dedication to what the working class needed in this city. And so I'd love to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, tell the chat how you first got involved in politics and in LA, and your work with your work expands into so many different areas of LA politics. So whatever you're comfortable jumping into.
Yeah. So my name's Kris Rehl. I've lived in LA for 13 years. And I think I sort of had like a steady radicalization into politics. Uh, Obviously, like Trump becoming president was like a big wake up call. And then um, I think in terms of politics, the Brett Kavanaugh hearings made me really like a light bulb go off and make me realize like, oh, I don't know anything about any of the judges on the ballots when I vote. I like honestly, I talk about this all the time. I don't even really remember how I decided who I was voting for a long time especially because California has the jungle primary, so it's usually two Democrats. Like I truly could not tell you how I was voting for the first few years I lived here. But I don't know. I just sort of started becoming more and more interested in how the government worked, and I was a DNC delegate in 2020. I would not recommend anyone do that. It's a waste of time. I voted against the party platform because it was unjust and because the Democratic Party does whatever they want and they don't listen to delegates. So it's not a real democratic process. But I think, like for many people during the pandemic, seeing all of these systems break down and seeing just a massive number of people being pushed out onto the street from temporary shelters and all kinds of things was really horrifying. And seeing that, I was forever changed. I was like, there's no looking away from this for me. So I started doing some outreach on my own initially early on in the pandemic to unhoused neighbors. And then I got involved with Street Watch a little bit, a lot of it. But initially I got involved because there was a sweep on the corner of my block that I live on. And I was like, wow, that's really messed up. So yeah.
And could you kind of give us like a little bit of a background? Like what is Street Watch? What was Street Watch and that's it.
Yeah, definitely. So Street Watch was a project of LA Community Action Network and DSA LA. DSA LA was the fiscal sponsor of Street Watch, meaning they handled like the tax liability, donations, all that stuff.
And so like donations would go into them and then they would distribute them to you under their like 501c3 or something like that, right?
Yeah, they're a 501c4 because it's political. So
Got it.
501c3s can't be very involved with politics. So yeah, so Streetwatch, we monitored sweeps. We did outreach to like meet survival needs through mutual aid, organized different political campaigns, and we were sort of broken down into different locals based on neighborhoods or groups of neighborhoods. And Streetwatch fell apart in 2022 because of a lot of reasons, but you know, I don't know that Streetwatch. I mean, like the main reason was the tension with DSA. There was a lot of lack of transparency about decisions in terms of what we were allowed to do with our finances. There were like member votes in DSA that were overturned to give us our own treasurer. And some of that became public because there just was no response from DSA leadership at certain points when we were trying to get funding that we had donations for survival items. So there was sort of an outcry for them to respond. And there was a small faction in Streetwatch that wanted to stay with DSA. I don't think that was going to be tenable long term because DSA LA at least has a history of problematic behavior, especially towards marginalized groups. And that's like something DSA California recommended voting yes on Prop 1, which I know we'll talk about tonight.
Yeah, we'll get there. So. Yeah, I remember, getting trying to get involved with Streetwatch whenever I first joined DSA when I moved to LA, and it always kind of felt like there was like a disconnect or something like between the org itself and and Streetwatch. Like they were like the same but separate. Is that like accurate or?
Yeah, from what I understand, was there members of Streetwatch that were not also DSA members?
Yeah, so I think that was part of the issue. There were conflicting bylaws. Like it was one of Streetwatch's bylaws was like specifically stated you didn't have to be a member of DSA. Mm-hmm. And DSA did not like that. And a lot of the time we would end up in a situation where DSA was like sort of using Streetwatch's good public image to promote itself while like just kind of undermining us. But I think their organization took a hard turn toward electoral politics, and they sort of see everything else as a waste of time at this point, which is unfortunate. But
yeah, that was something I was going to ask you. Is that after 2022, when Streetwatch ended, as we all know, the unhoused population has continued to skyrocket, and people are still being pushed out of their homes. Is there anything that DSA has done to kind of replace the role that organization was filling, and if not, what have you done and to kind of fill that role?
I honestly don't know exactly what DSA LA is doing in terms of homelessness right now. That I know they have a housing and homelessness committee. When Streetwatch ended, they claimed that it was on a temporary hiatus, even though everyone in Streetwatch knew that wasn't true. And if you look at the social media posts since late 2022, mid 2022, you can see that it's inactive, other than a few posts to promote different things. So I don't know what the current situation is, but several Streetwatch locals actually had started splintering off. I think kind of in anticipation of this happening. My local did not, but we continued doing mutual aid and started our own group, which is LA Street Care. So we like officially established in 2022 and got a different fiscal sponsor and have been operating in 6 neighborhoods since then.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. What does that work look like? What is the mutual aid that you provide, and if there's any like tips that you could give to maybe some viewers who would be interested in getting involved in an unhoused mutual aid action in where they live.
Yeah. So sort of the foundation of what we do, I think, is we do outreach on Sundays. So we have partnerships with a couple different meal organizations, including Homie Made Meals. So we deliver meals and survival supplies. What we do is mutual aid and not charity. So that means what we're doing should result in more than just meeting people's material needs. So we also make an effort to like ask people what they need instead of just like assuming. But we show up to the same places consistently and try to have conversations with people and find out what's happening on the ground, if they're experiencing harassment from police or sanitation workers or any city officials. We work with them to figure out how to resolve that. And we talk about different ways like the city criminalizes the unhoused, and we do know your rights workshops and provide harm reduction supplies because our city and our state won't let us have safe drug use centers. So we have skyrocketing overdose deaths, which is a policy decision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I would love to, I think like your like the perspective that you bring as a mutual aid activist, as somebody who has been doing the work on the ground and everything, I think is really invaluable. And I think, you can read it in your guide, and I cannot compliment you enough on the guides that you write here and how useful they are and how much of an asset they are to LA, that left in LA. And I would love to kind of go through. We won't go through every single one, but I would love to go through a few different races. I know we definitely want to talk about Prop One, so maybe we can just start there, and kind of talk about what how you reached the conclusion that you did. If there's any other auxiliary information that we should know about, things like that.
Yeah. So Prop One is honestly the thing that I'm the most fired up about this election. For those who don't know, Prop One says that it's a ballot measure. So it says that it provides more funding and mental health services for the unhoused and also for veterans. And that is unfortunately not what it is. Basically, it is if Prop One passes. So first of all, in 2004, there was this ballot measure called the Mental Health Services Act, and that taxed 1% of income above $1 million. So every dollar you make over $1 million, you gave 1% to this mental health fund. Most of it went to county mental health programs, and that's how most of our mental health funding in the state is generated. Prop One.
I mean, that funding, does it? Because I know that the largest provider of mental health in California are prisons. So is that funding just like going to, is that where a lot of it is going, or is there other,
I I honestly don't know where um like the
The distribution.
psychiatric
Yeah.
departments in the LA County jail system gets its money. Um, but I I believe that's mostly separate. Um,
And so what is Prop
I do
1?
know.
Uh, sorry to interrupt you. You can go ahead.
I don't know. I was just going to say I do know from the outreach work I do that when somebody is having a mental health crisis, it generally takes 3, 4 more hours for a mental health professional from the county department to come out, which is really unfortunate and unacceptable because when someone's having a crisis, they can't wait for
Mhm.
several hours. Um, and also, there are a lot of people who to get want to receive mental health services, and they're unable to because they're put on a wait list for months, and they're not seen regularly.
And so Prop 1 it presents itself as this like kind of like, treatment's not tense. I think that's like the phrase that has been coined here as like this is a way we're gonna invest in mental health care in order to alleviate the state's unhoused population and the problems that come along with that. And what does it actually do?
Um, I I think their slogan should be forced treatment, not tons. But I'll get to that in a second. So Prop One, if it passes, would take a significant portion of the funding that existing mental health programs receive through the Mental Health Services Act, and uh, basically what that would do is give that money to the state, and the state government would then give out grants and loans to local governments, including cities, to build housing and personalized support services. Um, but there are a few problems with that. So, first of all, it's creating this like gigantic bureaucratic nightmare at the state level. You're removing all local oversight, local control, local needs for like more of a one size fits all system. Also, when you take mental health funding away from the county, they lose matching funds that the federal government provides for any kind of healthcare spending. So it's really double screwing existing mental health programs,
Mm.
and then triple screwing them because there is a mandate that if Prop 1 passes, another 30% of that funding, counties, like the remainder of what counties would have left, would have to be spent on housing. Um, and obviously, we need more housing, but not at the expense of mental health services, especially when they're so underfunded. And also, Prop 1 would add alcohol and substance use disorder uh, to the same pool of money that these mental health programs are drawing funding from. So they would be competing for the same much smaller amount of money.
Wow.
And all of this is like really ridiculous when we live in a state with several hundred billionaires. Like, there's just no reason
Yeah,
to
$1 billion surpluses.
Yeah.
Um,
Could you how does this relate to the proposed care courts?
So, care courts have actually already started.
Okay.
They are not able to scale up. I'll get into that in a second. But basically, what care courts are a program that Gavin Newsom has thrown a lot of support behind, and they are framed as like a mental health alternative court. So the way that liberals in the state legislature promoted it was like, oh, if somebody has a mental illness, they'll be diverted to care courts so they can get the treatment they need instead of going to jail, which is not good for them.
Right.
But in reality, people can be referred to care courts by almost anyone, a family member, a roommate, like anyone. And if a judge deems that you are severely mentally ill, you are sent to get a treatment plan, and you have to complete this treatment plan, which can entail you being in a facility for up to a year, and then then you get another hearing, and you could be held there for another year. If you do not successfully complete the treatment plan, you can be placed in a conservatorship, like Britney Spears, where you lose your legal rights, your medical rights, your bodily autonomy. You don't get to choose like which medicines you take. There are a lot of liberals, but also a lot of progressives and even leftists who have been really quiet about this issue and
Yeah.
have not taken a stance on this. And that's really disappointing to me. Every single progressive slash leftist elected in LA has been silent on Prop 1 and care courts. But it's really hard to take seriously when people are like chanting, "My body, my choice."
Yeah.
But like, if you have a mental health disability, actually not you.
Hmm. I'd love to hear more from you about like, I feel like this conversation around like, with Prop 1 specifically and with care courts, it kind of, we often hear when talking about like unhoused advocacy, we hear the phrase like, I can't think of like the exact phrase, but it's like, treatment resistant or like aid resistant, right?
I
People
like service resistant.
sorry, that's the phrase, right? So like the service resistance, right? And I would love to hear, just to base in your experience like working with unhoused people, or any knowledge you have about this, like where does that idea come from and what kind of drives that even within unhoused populations, and how will this make it worse? Or will this make it worse? Like how will this impact that?
Um, so service resistance is uh, it's not exactly a myth in that there are people who are like, no, I don't want that horrible service. And but like most people generally do want services. They just don't necessarily want like the horrible version. Like it's like, don't you want to eat this macaroni and cheese that's covered in like human feces? Like, no. And then it's like the city's like, oh, they didn't want their mac and
Right.
cheese, so
Or
they don't
this
get
mac and
any.
cheese that you have to go through this elaborate maze that I've set before
Yeah.
you in order to reach. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like in
Um,
my perception, it feels like a lot of it has to do with also like, the services that are being offered, oftentimes being very carceral, being offered by police, being like just like kind of like having a lot of similarities to systems that have like deeply traumatized a lot of unhoused people in the past.
yeah. So like the current big housing program that Karen Bass is doing, the mayor of LA, is called Inside Safe. And like she has done a lot of marketing saying that it provides like mental health services and all this stuff. And it just does not. Like it does not provide any kind of services, much less like mental health services. But one of the hotels where my mutual aid group goes, there are 10 security guards and there are two caseworkers. Um, and those two caseworkers are shared at multiple other locations where there are like hundreds of other people. So, and also like for anyone who doesn't know, caseworkers make like no money. So it's not like they're paying these security guards minimum wage, but like these caseworkers are like highly paid, whatever. Like they're making a policy decision um, to enforce these carceral rules, they also change the rules when people move in. They sign a contract, and then they subtly say like, "Oh, there have been like a lot of thefts, so we have to make a new rule where you can't go in each other's rooms, but you also can't be in the shared public spaces." And it's this pernicious thing where they're chipping away at the community. I think it's something a lot of people don't understand about sweeps and a lot of different things the city does. Like, people really do take care of each other. They form families at encampments, and like when they do this kind of thing, it's not just that they're enforcing these sort of like carceral rules. It's also they're like trying to destroy people's connections, which is really horrific, especially because there are no mental health services. So like people depend on each other. But to take it back to care courts and Prop 1, I don't know. I don't know necessarily how much that will impact service resistance. A lot of the time, people are labeled service resistant in the system. Like, if they say no to one thing, like, if you're offered a shelter on the other side of the city and you're like, I don't know anyone there, I don't want to go there, then you're labeled service resistant, and it makes it a lot more difficult for you to get into other programs.
Could you maybe go over a few different examples, including on top of that one you just gave, that are reasons people may deny or like turn down these services?
Yeah, so a lot of it, it's usually shelter situations. So a lot of the time, it's like, oh, you can come, but your partner can't, or you can
Right.
come, but your pet can't. And people don't like I don't think it's okay to leave someone's like partner behind, but like saying just abandon your pet is like a whole other level of like,
Yeah.
okay, like just go die on the street, dog.
Right.
That has to be a crime too, like pet abandonment. Like that can't
Yeah.
be just like a right.
Animal cruelty, and also just thinking about the cost that this might the money that it might cost the city later on down the line when there's a car accident and somebody hits the dog, or like for for city workers to go clean up a dead dog mess wherever, things like this.
Yeah, I mean,
horrible.
the LA animal shelters are
Yeah,
heavily
they're-
overcrowded
yes.
already and
Horrible.
underfunded. And
I don't know if people are marked as service resistant if they leave shelters necessarily, but that is also a common occurrence because sometimes people have like beef with like the case management company workers. Like there's harassment, and some of these inside safe motels have had like really like horrible conditions, like and actually more people have left inside safe than have been permanently housed. So
and given that
it's not a
fact,
great situation.
given that fact that you just mentioned, could you maybe go over briefly the money that is wasted on hotels that might be like skirting, or like might be getting away with or might be guilty of like certain violations under these contracts for Inside Safe?
Like specific violations of the motels?
Yeah, about hotels receiving contracts for Inside Safe and receiving money from the city, despite like varying violations, whether that be still renting out rooms to normal customers and listing their rooms online as available and things like this.
I'm not super familiar
Okay.
with all those things. There have been some wild stories that have not gotten any press coverage. There is an Inside Safe location in CD13 where I don't know all of the details because people had different versions of the story. But apparently, a man broke into a motel room where this woman was with her small child, and he like assaulted her. And I guess the small child like just like left and was like wandering down the hall. And there was a rumor that she died. And the security guard was like, "Oh no, she just went to ICU, but she was fine." But she never came back. I do not know what happened.
Hmm.
And
Let's get back to the topic.
that is not. Oh yeah.
I just wanted to say, like, when we're talking about Prop One, you recommended no here, and I think you've laid out really well why this would actually be a really harmful policy for California to adopt. Before we move on from Prop One though, and go to another topic, I would like to talk briefly about DSA California. Originally in their voter guide recommended a yes vote on this, but there's some updates. Am I wrong?
Yeah, so DSA California, first of all, DSA LA had left Prop 1 blank in their voter guide, and they had a comment that said, waiting for DSA California's recommendation. I don't know exactly what their process is for who does their voter guide and what sections, but DSA California did post publicly vote yes on Prop 1, and I made a graphic that sort of broke down the highlights of why Prop 1 was terrible. And it is a very confusing bill. But I started a little bit of a social media campaign to try to make sure DSA LA did not just copy and paste that endorsement, because it is looking, unfortunately, like Prop 1 is going to pass, but it is like a human rights atrocity, in my opinion. So it's something that I really care about. I also I should have said this before, but the way that Prop 1 connects with the care courts specifically is care courts don't have any funding or like infrastructure to carry out like the mass institutionalization that they're meant for. And Prop 1 is an attempt to build a bunch of forced treatment facilities. Gavin Newsom, when he unveiled Prop 1 at a press conference, it was at LA General County Hospital, which the same month that he unveiled it, there was an investigation into that hospital for restraining psychiatric patients at 50 times more than the national average. And that is federally prohibited unless a patient is harming themselves or others. And like, obviously, if you're doing that at a rate of 50 times the national average, that's
something's wrong.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And also, politicians stripped language from Prop 1 at the last minute that would have prevented funding being allowed to be used at forced treatment facilities. So a lot of people who are mental health advocates and were okay with Prop 1 were like, "Oh wow, you really betrayed us." So it's really sinister. Like, Gavin Newsom is a Batman villain, and
real.
It really seems like he's trying to run for president, and
it's pretty obvious in my opinion. Yeah.
The unhoused population in California is much higher per capita than the national average. So, like, trying to convince the rest of the country that you're prepared to be president when you've created this humanitarian disaster is like. So he's like, "We'll just lock everyone up."
Yeah,
and it's it is always those. That is always the answer, right? Like, let's go just straight to like incarceration. It's It's the only answer that the political imagination of the Democrats allows, in a way. We can have massive skyscrapers in downtown Los Angeles that are empty and
Yes.
just sitting there rotting out, and they still will never acknowledge that building more housing and providing people with housing is the is the solution of it. It has to be in a carceral setting almost every time.
Yeah, Gavin is definitely very excited, eager for the Supreme Courts to rule, to give like state and local governments more power over the decisions for these types of issues. Like, given that it's pretty obvious, in my view and in other people's views, that he definitely wants to run for president someday. He knows obviously that the biggest issue that he has nationally is like the optics of the homelessness issue in California. So liberals, when their progressive language doesn't get them the action that they'd like to see in a short amount of time, that's politically viable for them, they're willing to turn to more carceral means. Very, very clearly, this is a perfect example of that.
Well, Chris, are there any
Definitely.
votes that you're excited to vote for? So, what are of this March 5th primary? What are you most excited to?
Um,
Barbara
you
Lee?
know, I'm like honestly not even that excited. I mean, I'm excited for Barbara Lee, but I'm not feeling great about her chances. So
Oh wow.
I, I it's hard to feel excited about electoral politics. I guess
Understandable.
the one area where there's still like a little hope is electing public defenders into superior court judgeships. It feels like something that can actually make a difference in people's lives. Obviously, not a perfect situation still, but uh, I don't know. Like, even I'm kind of a city council nerd, but it's between sort of the progressive bloc, slowly compromising their values, and also just the inability to like get major things through. Um, it just is. It's hard to feel excited for that.
Yeah, I feel you. I definitely feel you on that. And just to give kind of a background on what you're talking about there, we have in Los Angeles, we have a very powerful city council. So we have 16 seats, 15 seats, I think, on the city
15,
council.
yeah.
Yeah, 15 on the city council. And in many, many ways, the city council has a lot more power than the mayor. We have like a pretty weak mayoral like seat, and a very, very strong city council. In most other cities, like like in Chicago or something, like they will have uh 60, 70 people in their city council. Aldermen is what they call it in Chicago, at least. Same with LA, or same with New York. LA has a very unique city council situation where it's like extremely undemocratic, and we have very few councilors for how big the population of the city is and how diverse the neighborhoods are here, obviously. And of those 15 seats, all of them are occupied by capital D Democrats, except we do have three councilors currently in office who were elected by DSA. One of them, I think, is I still hold hope in my heart for Ulysses Hernandez, even though Ulysses has not been unblemished, certainly, but I think has been way more consistent in her votes and way more, like has kept her commitment to the things she ran on. Mostly, she ran as an abolitionist, um, you know, seeking to address the inequality between the LA Police Department's budget and the rest of the city funding, and has voted along those lines every time, even when that was breaking with her other two DSA cohorts, being Hugo Soto Martinez and Nithya Raman, which I guess leads us pretty well into the District 4 race. Nithya Raman is running for re-election in this upcoming race. And there's been a lot of drama around this race, both on kind of both sides. I see in your voter guide you do you recommend a vote for Nithya, which I think is really the only logical option. There aren't her Nithya's opponent is as fascist as you can get in a city council position. As fascist as we've seen, at least I think Ethan Weaver.
It's also like a Ryan Murphy Glee character version of a fascist, like, and that's not like a gay stereotype because Ethan Weaver is very sensitive about that aspect of his identity. I just mean like he is like enthusiastically Rachel Berry-esque, like, I'm a good boy, please, 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 I'm gonna criminalize you. Yeah.
Maybe could you kind of give like a background of what's happened in the last few months regarding this race with Nithya and DSA?
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Nithya ran in 2020, and she was the first candidate for city council to unseat an incumbent in 17 years. She had like a very inspiring campaign. I volunteered on it. It helped me understand city politics better. But just a little bit of quick background, she did vote to increase the police budget every year. And DSA did not really do anything to hold her accountable for that or some of the other decisions she's made, which is especially disappointing because like Ulysses voted against it. And she was fine. There were no consequences. And when, let's see, when I honestly don't remember which one started it off. I think DSA made a statement about Israel and Palestine initially. I'm sorry, I'll stop. Before that, like in March of 2023, the Palestinian Working Group in DSA released a statement condemning Nithya's affiliations with Zionist groups, political groups specifically.
Yeah, and her votes. She voted for the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which conflates anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, and there was one other vote that was pretty like anti-Palestine. It was with the teachers union and BDS, I believe, something like.
Okay. But yeah, they basically publicly traded statements about their stances on Israel and Gaza, which was particularly strange because DSA endorsed Nithya and then voted to censure her, but also in the same statement where they censured her, also re-endorsed her.
Yeah, right. So it was like soon after October 7th, DSA. I'm pretty sure it was DSA National, like put out a statement that was viewed by a lot of people as not. It was in support of Palestine. It was in support of Palestinian liberation. But of course, Zionists took that and represented it as a pro-Hamas statement, a pro-October 7th statement. This was also around the same time, if people remember, there was a DSA protest in New York where somebody had a photo, like I think the New York Magazine or somebody published a photo of a guy holding his phone up with a photo of a swastika on it. at a DSA rally. And so all of these kind of things like culminated together to kind of like where there was like a week of like online discourse where everybody was like, DSA was taking a lot of flack for their position on Palestine. And during that time, Nithya released a statement saying that she found DSA's statement about Palestine to like that it didn't acknowledge the deaths of October 7th enough. Nithya has kind of always been releasing these statements that are just very like both sides on this issue. Has openly courted endorsements from Democrats for Israel. And it was really this most recently, Democrats for Israel did endorse Nithya and her opponent, Ethan Weaver. And in doing so, the entire left was like, wait, what the fuck? We have a DSA endorsed candidate who's also endorsed by Democrats for Israel during the middle of a genocide? And DSA's membership forced a vote for censorship, expulsion, and de-endorsement. And actually, like, the membership was more liberal than the. This was a really interesting part of this vote, was that when you looked at the actual results of the vote, the leadership wasn't like recommending either way on a lot of these things, and but the membership was very clear that they did not want to de-endorse, but they did vote for a censorship, which was essentially ended up being just like a strongly worded letter that didn't even specifically like reference, outside of her endorsement for Democrats for Israel, didn't reference the IHRA vote, didn't reference like Nithya's general, Zionist courting. But they're still endorsing Nithya. I think you dedicate 8 pages in your voter guide to this race, which I think is deserving. I think it's a very, very good resource. Some of the best writing I've seen, kind of summarizing up Nithya's career and the controversy and the kind of the uncertainty that many of us on the left have about her in this race. But I do agree with your final conclusion that like Nithya is the only option that we have, and is clearly better than her opponent Ethan. However, if we had an organization, a DSA in Los Angeles that was willing to address these issues as they happened and willing to hold their electeds accountable, maybe we could have run somebody better in this seat. That is obviously the seat is obviously receptive to leftist ideology. Like, Nithya did win in 2020 in this seat, but we don't. So Nithya is our only option.
Similar to that, similar to Nithya, I noticed we in the voter guide you endorse Janice Hahn, but the explanation is long and thorough and very, I guess, negative in regards to how it describes Janice Hahn and her history and her nepotism and her past being in positions of power. Maybe we could even, since we're getting closer to that time, we could close on your reasoning for things like that, which are throughout this entire voter guide, the importance of holding people accountable, and even though you may be endorsing them, mentioning their shortcomings, I guess, for lack of a better term off the top of my head, why that's so important.
Yeah, so first of all, I think I have a real problem, especially with leftist organizations that do not hold the candidates they endorse to account, because when you do that, you're creating space for much worse people to say, well, they got away with it, so you can't criticize me for that. And not only that, it really moves sort of the window of what is acceptable for people who are less involved, voters who are less involved, who are looking at your organization's reaction to what these politicians are doing. And when you are like a reputable leftist organization and say that's fine, then the people who aren't paying attention as much are like, oh, well, they say it's fine, so it must be. But in reality, it's just about maintaining proximity to power, which is kind of sad. So that's that's like one of the main reasons why I still write this voter guide, is to make sure people are being held to account. I don't believe that when you do something bad and cause harm to a group of people, when you go and do something else that is positive and like pass like some progressive policy, that it balances out, it like you've caused harm to people and you have to take responsibility for that. It doesn't matter how many good things you've done.
Mhm.
And sometimes there isn't a better option, um, as is the case in a lot of these races. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, seeing the way that, like for Nithya specifically, like the main issue she ran on was homelessness, and she hasn't been perfect on that, but she has done a lot of good things. So I talk about both of those. I I am worried about specifically like her policies on RVs have sort of taken like a really conservative turn. So like that's one area I wanted to make sure I talked about. I probably could have gotten even deeper on that issue. Um, but for people like Janice Hahn, it's a little different because I really don't have anything nice to say about Janice Hahn in my heart of hearts. Like I think she's a bad person with bad politics.
Mhm.
I almost did not even recommend her because she has raised so much money, and just I don't think Alex Villanueva would win. But the risk of him getting on
It's
Yeah.
the county board of supervisors is just like
Agreed.
too much.
We need to leave him
Um,
in LA's political past. Like he needs to remain a private citizen.
Mm-hmm.
but I also think, I tweeted something about this today, but I miss in 2020, everybody was like shouting from the rooftops, politicians are not your friends. But like now, a lot of people have friends who, like, their literal friend was elected to office or working in someone's office. So it becomes this tribalistic thing where it's like, oh, well, they're like one of the good politicians. And it's like, no, they're operating in a corrupt system. And um, so I think it's very difficult to communicate nuance in politics because of that tribalism. And, um, I don't write this guide as like a cheat sheet. I really want people to understand what they're voting for. But I also want them to understand that people are complex. And it's like, I've spent so much time since Karen Bass got elected being like, no, actually, she is pretty awful.
Yeah.
So I think it's an important tool to make sure people understand it's not like this team good, this team bad. Um, yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Tofu, do you have anything else for Kris?
I think that was my last made question. I think we covered a lot of it during, unless you had anything else.
All right. Well, listen, I got Kris's socials and everything pinned in my chat. Please, everybody, go and check out Kris's work. Kris is an amazing person in LA politics. Somebody definitely to follow. The voter guide also exists and is accessible in wherever you find this podcast. It'll be in the description, and we'll be posting it in our chats live right now. The voter guide itself it's something I love is that it's not only a voter guide, but it has like lists of journalists that you respect, people like just like resources on how to stay how to stay up to date and interested and activated on this kind of stuff. Which at the bottom of the page or at the bottom of the guide, and I can't say enough how valuable of a resource this is, Kris. I hope you're always in a position to be able to do this. I hope people support you in doing this. I know you have, your Venmo is located on your Twitter page, I believe, and I would suggest everybody who finds value in this voter guide to support Kris and everything that they do. Is there anything you want to plug, Kris?
I would say also follow LA Street Care on Instagram and Twitter. I have a Substack newsletter because I'm trying to get away from Twitter sometimes for
Fair.
my mental health.
Absolutely fair.
And
Mhm.
I try to write about issues going on in the city when it's not voter guide season. I also am a TV and comic book writer, so I have some
cool.
comic book projects coming out hopefully this year. So
Can't
I'll
wait.
talk about
Oh, that's
those.
awesome. Wait, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Could you maybe put, is there anything that we could like point to that it already exists out there in the wild?
Is it on your Substack?
Yeah, I would say just sign up there because
Okay.
stuff hasn't been like formally announced yet. But I write about a lot of themes that I'm passionate about and politics in my fiction as well. So
Rad.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on,
talking
Kris.
with us.
Yeah, we really, really
Thank you
appreciate
both.
you. You're an excellent first guest on our little chat we're doing here. So I really appreciate your willingness to hang out.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Of
much.
course.
Yeah. Thank you
All
so
right.
much. I think we'll let you go, and then we'll wrap it up here, and then we'll end it out.
All right. Have a good one.
Take care.
Bye, Kris.
Woo!
All right.
That was awesome.
Good stuff. man.
Thank you so much for watching or for listening or wherever this finds you. Just a quick reminder, you can find both of us live right now. Whenever you're watching this, we are live right now. Come and hang out with us on twitch.tv. I am Cinemarxism, spelled like it sounds. And then Tofu Ghost, we'll go ahead with
Tofu
yours.
Ghost, TOFUGH0ST, because I'm obnoxious.
Hell yeah. Come
And
in.
this has been What's Left LA.
Yeah, come in and hang out. We do these live on Mondays in the nighttime. Feel free to jump in the chat while we're live. Do this. We both do politics coverage and a little bit of gaming. So, you can just come in and hang out on your own too, wherever this finds you. Thank you so much, Tofu. I love doing this. This is such an awesome little venture for both of us.
Absolutely.